Further to my video concerning the sort of logic of Benatar's position, David Benatar's asymmetry, sort of militating inevitably towards some sort of blind belief, I suppose, or some sort of self-delusion. It may not actually have to be a self-delusion if you're consciously aware of what you're doing. When you engage in the activities that religious people are known to engage in their worship or their practices, in order to actually experience something. It's not a question of believing in a deity. It's not a question of actually thinking that such and such a thing is real, or believing in a certain epistemology, or adhering to a certain kind of metaphysics. It's just, if you engage in a certain practice with a certain mindset, there may be certain benefits. Now, if you look into the phenomenon of belief, into religion, there's more to it than just blind adherence to a mythology, or blind adherence to a creation myth, or blind adherence to the existence of a god, or whatever. Mystic of the Sands, an antinatalist atheist, I believe, is one of the people that I most enjoyed dealing with in this particular subject. Although Got That Funk actually has a bit to say about it as well. He did a video quite a while back, about enjoying scripture without God. Now that's an interesting concept. Alain de Botton, whom I don't particularly like, to be honest, wrote a book, which I haven't read, called Religion for Atheists. And he raises an interesting point. He says, the belief in a mythology, or the belief or blind belief or whatever in religion, is not all there is to it. And there may be things in religion that atheists and people who are determined atheists can still benefit from. And again, I'm not suggesting that anyone do this. I'm not proselytizing for this. I'm just sort of thinking out loud, and I'm just interested in where this is going to lead me, because if you actually look at how the religious comport themselves, especially, say, a particularly mystical sort of religion, mystical religious activities or whatever. For example, let's say that you go to a Southern Baptist church that is a congregation made up of African Americans. Okay, now, when you see the way they worship, or at least some of the churches, some of the Southern evangelical churches, the way it works, you don't simply go in there and you're told a bunch of stuff by the pastor about the way the universe is and you blindly swallow it all. Something else is taking place. There's actually a few churches like this, made up mostly of people from the West Indies and the Philippines, where I live right now, but they operate like that. The audience participates. The audience will get up and clap their hands and dance, or they will sing ecstatically, or they'll drop to their knees in sort of an impromptu sort of ecstatic state, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what it is. I wish I had the capacity to sort of do that, but I think I'm far too skeptical. I don't think I can do that. It just doesn't seem to be in me to do that. And perhaps I might not even have the need for it. I don't know. But you look at what's happening, and there's more there than blind belief. There is something that is taking place in these people's minds. They're having some sort of experience, or maybe they are. To all appearances, they're having some sort of an experience, some sort of ecstatic experience. The one that I'm most familiar with, again, is the Indian idea of bhakti, which is where you just pour out ecstatic love towards God. And as I say, belief is not even necessary in this case. The more, as I say, the more intellectual sort of theoreticians, I guess, or theologians, or I don't know what you'd call such a person, who propounds bhakti as a form of emotion-based religious experience as opposed to something based in the intellect, will tell you the existence of God is secondary, if not out and out irrelevant. It doesn't matter if there is a God or not. What matters is the experience that you have when you engage in it, and how it changes you and how it affects you. In its more intense forms, bhakti involves endlessly chanting mantras throughout the day, It involves in communal singing of songs. If you've ever seen the Hare Krishnas, the cheerful yet profoundly annoying Hare Krishnas, beating their little cymbals, pounding on drums and singing and everything, that's not just some ceremony that they do to propitiate their god. They want something out of that. They want it to affect their conscious minds. They want something to happen as they do this, and they're also told that you have to do this for a number of years before you get, concrete results or whatever. Now, I'm skeptical enough to say that's garbage. Okay, I don't believe that simply believing in something and constantly reinforcing that belief in yourself is really going to get you any benefits, because you're essentially believing in something that isn't there. But let's say we took somebody who came at that sort of thing with a less skeptical bent. They had the capacity to suspend their disbelief for a while, and they were to engage in endless mantra meditation. They were which I actually engage in, but for completely different reasons, by the way. They're also, they attend these communal sing-along things that these Hare Krishna-like bhakti groups that you see in the Hindu communities throughout the world engage in. Sikhs do this as well. Certain Islamic communities do it. And again, the more charismatic religious sects all do it. When you see the people up there waving their arms and praising God and everything. Let's say you made a physical and psychological and biological and neural study of those people who engaged in that sort of thing before they started, and then afterwards, or you studied them during what they were doing. Let's say, and this would not surprise me if they found out that this did have some sort of benefit for them, that it did actually increase their concentration, or it made them happier overall, or made them think clearer, or it enabled them to relax better, or they just were happy. When I put on bhakti music as background music in my house, right now I'm painting my house and I often do that, you often see the people, the Hindu people, they'll simply stand up in the middle of one of these long songs, and the songs can last, or it's a sing-along that can last 2 or 3 hours, and they just, like this. Now, I don't know what's going on in their mind. It could simply be that their religion says that you should do that, so they do it just to go through the motions. They may not be feeling anything. They may simply be doing it because they believe that that's what their God expects them to do, or whatever. But I'm going under the assumption that they do feel something in that moment when they're, in their view of things, communing in a loving, profoundly loving way with God. I guess a Catholic or a Christian view would be they're having in that moment the beatific, I think that's how it's pronounced, the beatific vision. You're staring directly into the face of God, and you get this enormous feedback from God, which is profoundly positive. Now, I've never felt this myself, but I understand how it's supposed to go in theory. And the Catholic variants are the same thing. You chant the rosary, you sing songs, you go to Mass, you engage in all these ceremonies and all this stuff. And it's supposed to have an effect on you over time. Now, it will alter your mind, I guess, in certain ways. And even sort of a skeptic and rather irreligious person like myself will say, oh yeah, it also lowers your resistance to people who want to manipulate you. Now, I get. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing, and that's the unintended consequence here of if I were to be propounding this as an idea for people, to say even if you're an atheist, go down to the local charismatic church and engage in all of these spiritual practices, and it will benefit you. It might, but it might also soften your resistance to the attempts at the pastor to manipulate you or to take your money or something like that. There's a downside to that. There's a major downside to that, to blind belief. I get it. I understand that. The downside of blind belief is demonstrated every time somebody decides to pop their cork and open fire on a crowd, as we've seen in Paris or in San Diego. That's why I am not propagating this. I'm more or less just sort of, again, I'm working within the bounds of the asymmetry. And I'm trying to see if there is something else that we can do here as humans that will actually not simply nullify the asymmetry, which I believe has already been done, but actually prove it to be actually in some ways quite wrong, or potentially wrong. Is there any way, in other words, that you can so enhance your own life that it's definitely better to have been born? Now that's an interesting one, because as I say before, all I've been trying to do is to sort of say that his asymmetry doesn't hold. It's purely symmetrical. And again, that led me to the conclusion that maybe if harm is all that matters, then atheism can take second place to harm reduction. That seems to be implicit in what Benatar is saying. So, acting under the assumption that the people in a charismatic church or who are listening in what's called Sankirtan, this bhakti music, and they sort of, when they sway back and forth, when they're singing their songs for hours on end or whatever, it looks like a profoundly pleasant experience, by the way. Kids get up and dance and everybody sings and everybody feels great and everything is nice. I'll leave a link below in case anyone's even remotely interested. I doubt it, but it's just the kind of stuff that you see when people engage in this Sankirtan, this communal singing stuff. It's essentially, I think, a meditation, but it's not meditation in the way that I practice it. It's meditation based on your emotions. It's not meditation based on trying to focus your mind the way I do it. They're just trying to focus, I guess, their feelings, their emotions, their sense of love, their sense of joy. They're trying to hone that to make themselves feel better, and I guess in their belief system to become closer to God. Now, if we were to study that over the course of a year or however long we wanted to, I am willing to bet, at least even odds, that science will conclude that people who engage in this benefit from it in some way. That people who engage in mystical activities, the more first-person type of religious experience. I'm not talking about theology, I'm not talking about mythology, I'm talking about mysticism here. Direct experience of the real, or direct experience of something. The way that I normally describe it now is the difference between, say, a Sufi Muslim, who is the one who believes in the experiential aspect of Islam, and a Wahhabi Muslim, which is the Saudi Arabian Salafist kind of one that says, no, it's all about the proper rules to live by. The Sufi might not be terribly worried if his neighbor drinks alcohol, and he might actually have the odd drink himself. He's not terribly worried about public morality, just the usual that most people are. What to him, what Islam means is direct communion with God. To the Saudi or the Wahhab, it means obedience to God's commands, and that's enough. So what I'm sort of moving towards here is using, as some people have kind of suggested, and this is something that seems to come naturally to me, using religious sort of, or practices that have evolved religiously in a thoroughly atheistic or philosophical capacity. I don't think that very many people would be interested in pursuing this, but it's a fascinating sort of corrective to the asymmetry, and it's also fascinating to see that life affirmation or life enhancement can actually happen in a thoroughly atheistic context, or non-theistic in my case. I'm not an atheist, but I don't shy away from, I don't believe in God. I don't practice anything religious, but I don't feel like I need to avoid religion. I'm not an anti-theist. I don't think that it has a capacity to infect me the way that a lot of people seem to do. As I say, something in me wishes that I could, go down to my local charismatic church and sing and everything like that. But I would just feel like a complete fraud, not to mention a complete idiot in engaging in that kind of thing. It's just not in me to do it. But I can understand the attraction. I can understand why people say, I don't understand why most people do this. Now, my wife is a Christian. My wife is a practicing Christian, and her church does this kind of thing. In her church, they do actually sing along. They do. It's a kind of an evangelical Protestant church, and they do get up and sing, and they dance, and they commune, and all that kind of thing. I've made it quite clear I ain't going, never going to go. My wife has made her peace with that. I say I know that that's kind of a prejudice, but that's just the way I'm put together. I just can't do that. I need to actually believe that something is, not supernatural for me to actually cleave to it. Ideas are fine. Abstractions are fine, but to actually go down there with people who actually do believe that there's something up there called God, and I'm in there acting along with them, is a little bit too much to expect of me. But I get it. I understand why somebody might do that. Now, having said that, I've said before that I do mantra meditation, but I don't really believe that these mantras do anything other than simply put my mind into a nice, calm place. When I listen to music when I'm in my meditations, I don't have a religious experience at all. But I do get into the music, and that's nice. That's a very pleasant feeling, getting into the music and letting the music sort of, as they say, flow through you and everything. But where I do get some kind of mystical experience is if I'm reciting poetry to myself when I'm meditating. I will not cease from mental fight, nor shall my sword sleep in my hand, till we have built Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant land. You don't have to be a theist to have those lines move you a little bit. Again, I hate to say this, but I come from a culture where poetry is not considered unmanly. The Irish Catholic culture here in North America, however masculine and sort of, ridiculously masculine it actually is in certain ways fairly open to that kind of thing, to, weeping when you're reading poetry, even if you're a bruiser, a real tough guy who, sits home and drinks beer and farts all day and stuff like that. That's still okay in the Irish community. I don't know why that is. I've never looked into it, but it does seem to be the case. Other cultures are like that. I think the Russians are like that, and the Spaniards or whatever. Poetry means something to them. It actually moves them. It actually affects them. So I'm not saying that I can actually get into the religious stuff, but I can see the value of things like poetry and music and all this other stuff that appeals directly to the emotions and the irrational. We are not just rational. We are rational, we are logical, but we are much more than that. And I think that one of the advantages and one of the things that religion has is that it does appeal to more than that. But again, it has a downside to it. How do you think Hitler convinced, 80 million highly intelligent people, Germans, one of the most educated, hard-nosed, practical countries in Europe at the time, to follow his mad ideas? Because he appealed directly to their emotions and their subconscious. He did an end run around their reason without them knowing it. Appealing directly to the irrational or to the subconscious or to the subliminal is a dangerous thing, but we have that happen to us every last time we watch television and a commercial comes on. It's already happening to us. What is taking place there? How can we explain that scientifically? I'm not talking about people are being deluded or tricked here. I don't dispute that for a second. And I'm not, again, positing this kind of thing as a path for anyone to follow. I'm talking strictly theoretically here. We can say that in one of those Sankirtan things, when the Hindu people get up and, wave their arms and kind of dance and sway with the music and that somebody is playing, that they're being deluded, okay, that they're believing in a God, because it's heavily theistic, of course, that they're believing in a God that just ain't there. Fine, I get that. But how about the experience that they're having? We can't say that they're not having that experience. I don't believe that there is a God, but I'm convinced that these people are having something resembling an ecstatic experience. That, to me, says that you can have that without God. Because I don't believe that there is a God in any of that. It's just a bunch of people who have engaged their emotions to feel a certain way, to help, or their beliefs and their emotions to feel a certain way. I get it. I understand the idea that they're sort of building a house of cards here, because they're believing in something that does not phenomenally exist. But they are also experiencing something that is unarguable, in my opinion. In my opinion. I'm not in their heads. I don't know what they're actually feeling. But when you look at them, it looks like they are feeling it. It looks like this is sincere when you know, in a Southern Baptist church, people get up and dance and praise the Lord and fall to their knees and weep and everything like that. You can say that it's all garbage and it's all delusion. At the end of the day, I agree that it is. But the experience itself is still happening. So working on that experience, that ecstatic experience in a strictly non-theistic context, I wonder what that would actually do to the asymmetry, to actually cultivate the positive ecstatic emotions in a thoroughly non-theistic context. I wonder what that would actually do to you, or how it would be perceived, how it would be followed. Again, Mystic of the Sens and Got That Funk have kind of talked along those lines, but they seem to show the same reticence that I do. It's just that, okay, I can understand this in theory, but I don't really want to get involved in it because, I don't know, I'm kind of disgusted by religion or whatever. But if we're going to get theoretical here, I think that it's possible to do that, to engage the emotions and to manipulate, or I guess to control one's own emotions, to bring on a state of heightened well-being, a state of heightened love, optimism, joy, etc. It's obviously happening. They're doing it maybe using means that are useless to me, but maybe I just need to find my own means to do it. You know, a rock concert comes to mind when people are there ecstatically listening. My favorite one is going to a folk festival with all the hippies out there. Maybe they're on drugs or whatever, but not all of them would be. And they're just up there, you know, in their cutoffs and waving their hair around, dancing in front of the band, having a great time, and their kids are down there doing the same thing. What's going on there? What actually is that? And how would we filter or factor rather that in to any assessment of their quality of life? How would their lives be improved by them not doing it? I would actually say that their lives are actually being improved. Their overall quality of life is probably quite markedly improved by, you know, dancing at a concert once in a while or dancing at a bar on Saturday night than if they didn't do it. It's an interesting thought, and again, it strays close to religion, which is why a lot of people shy away from that kind of thing. But I would say that that what Benatar does is he removes people's capacity to engage their emotions. I understand that we are simply biological units. I understand that. But there's more to us than that. We have emotions. We have feelings. We have the irrational, which is just as much a part of us as the rational and the purely biological. Just a thought, but again, I'm really fascinated by this idea that, you know, the asymmetry actually may be farther wide of the mark than I thought it was originally.